Hey, if you like my content, please consider subscribing, drop a like on my video, and share it on social media. Thanks. So I wanted to talk about a couple of things that I have not yet spoken about at all on my channel, and those are Breonna Taylor and Jacob Blake. The reason I have not spoken about either one of them is because I just haven't taken the time to look into them until now, more or less. I didn't really know enough about them to say anything. I did say a few things about Breonna Taylor, mostly just expressing my misunderstanding. But we have somebody called Ibram X. Kendi. That's not his original name. He changed it to that. And he's going to say some stuff on NPR about Breonna Taylor, and I wanted to share that with you.
Ibram X. Kendi had that conversation with NPR this week. He's an author and historian and founding director of Boston University's Center for Anti-Racist Research. He spoke to my colleague, Tanya Mosley.
You are an anti-racist scholar. Do you see a future where we can come together in what we all wish for, and that's a system of anti-racist policing?
I mean, that's the goal. That's the hope. But I think in order to reimagine public safety, we're going to have to reimagine violence and danger.
Okay, so I don't think we need to reimagine violence and danger. I think he's going to go in to explain that people perceive black people as violent and dangerous. These ideas are just unfounded. Prove to me first that police practices are racist. I have seen some people bring evidence, or at least bring a good argument to the table, but really you're not bringing any proof. You're just making an assumption that the way that the police operate is racist. It's not, I don't know, it's just, show me the evidence. Really, that's what I need. Just show me the evidence.
And in that reimagining of violence and danger, we cannot be connecting violence and danger and criminality to the color of one's skin. That is indeed a racist idea, to connect danger and violence and criminality to black people and then state that it makes sense. Officers are justified in fearing for their lives when they shoot and kill unarmed black people, or when they barge into someone's home late at night and those people, thinking that they're a robber, they seek to defend themselves. Because of racist ideas, it is imagined that black people do not have the right to defend themselves, particularly in the face of white police officers.
Okay, so right there, that was just what he said makes absolutely no sense. No, you don't have the right to actually defend yourself against the police. Okay? What are you talking about? You don't have the right to shoot police. If the police come for you, they come into your space and say you're under arrest, or, we're here, we're the authorities. Their job is to protect the public from the bad parts of the public, right? That's what they do. This notion that black people are criminals inherently, where does that come from? If it actually does exist, right? I don't look at a black person and go, that person's a criminal. This is so far out of nowhere. It's like, I don't have the right to defend myself against the police. Like, okay, so I'm white. I don't have the right to defend myself against a black cop or a Hispanic cop or a Asian cop, an Arabic cop. I don't have the right to defend myself against cops of other races just because they're of other races. This is, where are you getting this from? It's like I can shoot the police because they're invading my space. No, the police have the right to do that. If they're issuing a warrant, if they're coming to arrest you, they have the right to invade your space. They're not allowed to assault you, but if you give them a reason to assault you, then they are allowed to. So don't give them a reason to assault you, which is what Breonna Taylor's boyfriend did. He shot at the police. He admits he shot first. So let's see what else he has to say.
And that's wrong.
You wrote last night, to be black in America is to walk in the valley of the shadow of pain and death. The fact that black people still
Then don't be black in America. You can leave. I mean, if this country is hunting you down and killing you, why would you stay? Unless you had nowhere else to go. I have nowhere else to go. There's not another country that I can go to that isn't adopting these same beliefs and policies that we have in the United States that are anti-white. There is simply not. Canada's doing it. All of Western Europe is doing it. Maybe I could go to Eastern Europe. That's the only place maybe for me. But I have a wife who barely speaks English as it is. So uprooting her, taking her with me to Eastern Europe, so we can both learn a new language. That's just not really that feasible at this point in time. Let's see, maybe in the future.
Manage to carry on and create and find joy and love in the valley is nothing short of a miracle. And right now, our love of Breonna Taylor is filling us with rage. Dr. Kendi, where does that rage go from here?
It goes from here, first and foremost, of course, to mourn yet again. We not only have mourned her death, now we're mourning the fact that her killers are not going to be brought to justice. But
there is no reason to bring them to justice. We've looked at the footage, we've looked at the reports. Even her boyfriend says, I shot first. Okay, so if I have a gun and somebody shoots at me, I'm going to shoot back or run away. The police don't really have the option of running away. They have to face that danger. They're supposed to go into the danger. So this person shoots at 3 police officers. So 3 guns get drawn and they shoot back at him. What do you think is going to happen? Somebody's probably going to get hurt or killed in that situation. And one of the police officers was shot in a potentially deadly area. I mean, he had his femoral artery shot. That will kill you if it's not tended to very quickly.
But then that mourning transforms into seeking to transform our society, into seeking to transform American policing, in seeking to transform our criminal justice system, into seeking to disconnect blackness from criminality, into seeking to protect Black women, to protect every single American from police violence. And that's where we need to be focused on, and changing power and policy to ensure that happens.
Okay, so he said that we need to keep police brutality from happening from every American citizen, but nobody's crying about the police killing white people. It's only when it happens to a black person. Oh, we're hunting black people. We're so evil. This country is so anti-black. Oh, just evil against black people. Go somewhere else then. If this is true, go to another country where this isn't happening to you. I mean, why would you stay in a country that is hunting you down? And like I said, I gave you my reasons why I have to stay here. It's largely because there's nowhere else to go. There's very few places for me to go in the world. You don't go to these other places because it's not true that you're being hunted down in the United States. 1. And 2, the United States treats you better than you would be treated in most other countries. So this is a bunch of garbage, and we know it's garbage because otherwise you would just leave. You would find a way to get out of the country, and you're not doing that. You'd seek asylum in another country. That's the end of this talk. They just do their little outro thing. Thanks Dr. Kendi, blah, blah, blah. So I looked into Dr. Kendi a little bit here. Let's see who this guy is. So I watched a video of his. He says a whole bunch of nothing in that video. He says that all policies are racist. All policies are racist. That's why they're policies, No, that's not true. That is not at all true. There's a policy where I live of no smoking on the premises. It applies to everybody. There was, for a long time, my neighbors, all 3 of them white, smoked. They weren't allowed to smoke on the premises, so so on and so forth. It doesn't affect one race over the other. Most of the people living here, I think, are Hispanic. When I've been told when I go back to work on campus, there's going to be a policy when there is a vaccine available for the illness that is affecting the entire world right now. I'm supposed to get vaccinated. That's the policy. Never mind that many of my coworkers are Hispanic, Black, Asian. We all have to get it. We all have to get the vaccine. So no, not all policies are racist, okay? You need to chill there, Dr. Kendi. So he is a writer, historian, and professor. He claims he's a doctor, so that means he's a PhD in something, who knows what. And he is a professor which would be true if this is true. He's doing anti-racist research, Center for Anti-Racist Research at Boston University. So a lot of people think that if you are a teacher of college courses, you are automatically a professor. That is not how this works. You have to have a terminal degree in your field, and you have to do research. So he appears to be doing research. He's called doctor. Who knows if that's actually an earned title or if it's just something he calls himself. If he, in fact, does have that PhD, then he has a terminal degree, and he looks like he's doing research. So he is then technically a professor. But maybe he's not, and he's just calling himself that. So now, I imagine that the Center for Anti-Racist Research at Boston University is actually a center for racist research, racism against white people research. I don't think that he has any kind of credentials that mean anything. I don't know what his PhD is in. We can maybe look here. Education, bachelor's. He got a PhD in African American Studies. He got a PhD, so he has a PhD, and he's doing research. So he is a professor, technically. But African American Studies is what he got his PhD in. But what is African American Studies? I mean, seriously, what is that? Oh, I look at black people all day long, therefore I'm studying them? Is that is that what you're doing? Is it the history of black people in the United States? You know, it sounds like a garbage degree. It's like getting a degree in feminism. You don't need to get a degree in feminism to know that it's garbage, and women already have all the rights. They don't need any more. You're just listening to yourself pontificate on your own stupidity when you're getting a degree in feminism. So, I imagine African American Studies is the same. Like going, hey, look, I'm really awesome. I have a degree in African American Studies because I have a degree in African American Studies. And I'm sure it's all about how you've been oppressed in America because you're black and white men are evil. I don't know what it's about. I've never studied it. I watched another one of his talks. It was a short one where he talks about all these policies are racist. All policies are racist. Now, he does not bring up any examples. He does not use a single example. His big example is this. Aside from slavery and Jim Crow, all policies are racist because, look, that's why we can have Obama, a black president, and then right after that we have a racist president like Donald Trump. That's not an example of racism. First off, you'd have to define racism, then prove that Donald Trump fits that definition. And then you have to prove that he was put into office by racist policies. So you have to do all of those things. Good luck doing that, Dr. Kindy. All right, let's see. I want to talk about something else. I want to shift gears into Jacob Blake. I didn't talk about Jacob Blake. I suspected that the police were correct in Jacob Blake, but I didn't have time to look into it. My life is busy, and then there's been so much stuff going on in our society lately that's like, how do I keep up with everything, right? The lawyer says, cop shot Jacob Blake after hearing a mother's desperate plea. He's got my kid. He's got my keys. Huh. Police officer Rustin, has told investigators that it wasn't just his life he was defending when he fired his weapon 7 times at Jacob Blake last month in Kenosha, Wisconsin. He said he used deadly force during the chaotic encounter because he was afraid Blake, while attempting to flee the scene, was trying to kidnap a child in the backseat of the vehicle. He's got my kid, he's got my keys, the officer heard a woman say. According to the attorney, Brendan Matthews, who is representing the officer, if the officer had allowed Blake to drive away and something happened to the child, the question would have been, why didn't he do something? Matthews said. The explanation provided in an exclusive interview with CNN offers the most detailed rationale to date for the officer's highly scrutinized decision to shoot Blake, who is black, as he leaned into the SUV with his children inside it on August 23. Cell phone video of the shooting went viral on the internet, sparking days of protests and rioting in Lakeside City of Kenosha. The shooting, which Blake's family has said resulted in paralysis from his waist down, was widely condemned as yet another unjustified shooting of a black person by police. These shootings are not. The attorney's comments on CNN come as authorities in Wisconsin announce this week that the results of the investigation by the State Department of Justice would soon be turned over to a retired police chief serving as an independent consultant for his review. The consultant is in turn expected to forward the case to local prosecutors, along with an analysis intended to help determine whether criminal charges against the officer are warranted. The officer remains on paid administrative leave. Oh, cool, he gets a vacation. Matthews told CNN he typically does not talk about pending cases, but said he felt compelled to provide some additional detail to counter what he described as an incomplete, inaccurate narrative that has emerged to date. Matthews directly disputed assertions by Blake's family and lawyers that he was unarmed and posed no threat to the officers. At the time the officer opened fire, the lawyer said Blake held a knife in his hand and twisted his body toward the officer. That action is not visible in the video widely circulating on the internet, in which the view of Blake's body is partially obscured by the driver's side door of the SUV. Matthews said a second officer at the scene, whom he also represents, provided investigators with a similar account of Blake's turning toward the officer with a knife in his hand. Immediately prior to the shooting, the officer said he, too, would have opened fire, but did not have a clear angle, according to the lawyer. Authorities have said Blake had a knife in his possession and the weapon was found on the floorboard of the vehicle, but they have released few other details of the incident, citing the ongoing investigation. CNN reached out to Blake's attorney, Crump, for comments on Matthews' assertions, but did not receive a response prior to publication. However, Blake's lawyers have insisted he never posed a threat to the officers at any time during the encounter, and his father has denied his son was armed. They shot my son 7 times like he didn't matter. Jacob Blake Sr., Blake's father, told reporters, but my son matters. He's a human being and he matters. Blake was the aggressor at the scene, attorneys say. But Matthews, who represented the Kenosha Professional Police Association, said Blake was the aggressor in the encounter based on the statements the officer and Officer Vincent, other officer, gave to state investigators earlier this month. I have no idea how to pronounce their last names, so I'm not going to try. The officers, he said, were simply doing their job. Blake has not been charged with any crime stemming from the events of the day he was shot. The shooting occurred minutes after the officer and fellow officers responded to a call of family trouble in the neighborhood a couple of miles northwest of the downtown Kenosha. According to the dispatch log, the woman reported to police that Blake had taken her keys and would not give them back. Blake's family members later said he'd been attending a birthday party of one of his kids. Once at the scene, the officer watched Blake put one child in the car as he arrived, but was unaware that 2 more children were already in the vehicle. Matthews said another officer heard a woman yelling that Blake had her children. He said, but did not see the kids in the car. Some of what officers say happened next was described in the press release issued by Police Association last month. According to the release, Blake was non-cooperative from the outset and quickly became combative. When the officers attempted to physically take control of him, Blake actively resisted. An officer fired a taser at him, but it did not stop him. The release states, when officers tried to take Blake into custody a second time, he forcefully fought with them and was able to momentarily place an officer in a headlock. The release said. Matthews said that officer was the one that we're talking about here, the one who shot him. Police then tased Blake a second time, and he again appeared unfazed, according to the Police Association statement. So he's fighting with the police. They tased him twice. So they tried non-lethal options. At that point, Matthews said officers noticed that Blake was holding a knife. Guns drawn, they demanded that he drop the weapon. Blake, according to the police association statement, did not drop the weapon and began making his way around the front of the vehicle toward the driver's side door. Video of the incident shows Blake holding the knife in his left hand as he rounds the front of the car. The statement says, while it appears that Blake is holding an object in his hand, it is unclear that what this object is, according to CNN review of the video. Shortly after the release of the statement, Blake's lawyer disputed the police account as overblown and characterized the officers as the aggressors. Rasheen White, who shot video of the encounter, told CNN's Aaron Burnett he twice heard police tell Blake to drop the knife. That's probably Rasheen White. I don't know. People just name your kid something easy to spell. Spell it right. Whatever you're gonna name your kid, spell it phonetically. Why do we gotta spell these names all non-phonetically? But that he did not see a knife in Blake's hand. White disputed other aspects of the police account, but said it was possible some things occurred before he began witnessing the incident unfold. The police version of events leading up to the shooting bore some similarity to an encounter allegedly involving Blake at the same address 3 months earlier. In that case, the woman who described Blake as her ex-boyfriend said he took her car and debit card without her permission and made a $1,000 in fraudulent withdrawals. Okay, so he's a thief. This is ridiculous, this guy. Okay, according to the court records, she told police at the time that Blake did not have a car and that he would not tell her where he was living, the court records state. Blake was not charged with taking the car or money, but was charged with assault of an intimate nature and other offenses in connection with the incident. He was wanted in connection with those charges at the time of the shooting. The officer was aware that Blake was wanted, Matthews said, but did not know the details of the past incident prior to the shooting. Blake entered a not guilty plea to those charges earlier this month. Matthews said while 7 shots may seem excessive to some people, that number of shots is not out of line with other police shootings in Wisconsin and elsewhere that were later deemed justified. He also pointed to studies showing a lag time between an officer's decision to stop firing and actually doing so. The lawyer said that the officer ceased firing when he determined Blake no longer posed an imminent threat. Matthews questioned earlier reports that Blake was shot several times in the back. He said Sesky and fellow officers administered first aid at the scene and did not see any gunshot wounds to Blake's back. Rather, he said the officers reported seeing injuries to Blake's arm, side, and abdomen. The precise location of the gunshot wounds Blake sustained have not been made public. The news release from Wisconsin Division of Criminal Investigation initially said the officer fired his weapon 7 times into Mr. Blake's back. The agency later changed language to say the officer fired towards Mr. Blake's back. He didn't want this to happen, so it goes on talking about what the officer went into. The fallout from the highly publicized shooting has been devastating, his lawyer said. He had to move out of his house to get rid of his phone because he's been hounded by reporters and depicted as a racist and brutal cop on the internet, Matthews said. Matthews said his client has never pulled the trigger in the line of duty before now and has no history of abusing suspects in his 10 years as a police officer, the last 7 with Kenosha PD. Rather, the lawyer described his client as a lifelong do-gooder who, as a young man, served as a mentor on the cycling team for at-risk youth and worked as a lifeguard. He wanted to become a cop to continue helping people. Matthews said the officer immediately dropped to the ground in the moments after the shooting and began rendering first aid to Blake and comforting him when he expressed fear that he was going to die. He didn't go to work wanting to shoot anybody. He went to work trying to help people. That's what he does every day, Matthews said of the officer. He absolutely did not want this to happen. Yeah, so yeah, Jacob Blake was a criminal. He was a known criminal, and he was in the process of committing criminal acts. The police tried to subdue him using non-lethal force 3 times, and they couldn't subdue him. Then he pulled a deadly weapon and got himself killed. The police were not out there looking to kill somebody. What they're doing is they're protecting the peaceful citizens from the non-peaceful citizens. And in these cases recently, it just so happens, the ones that we're hearing about anyway, it just so happens that the non-peaceful citizens are black. I'm sure there's plenty of other crimes that are being committed by white people where the police are called and they end up killing a white person. But you don't hear about that because, that doesn't fit the narrative that the police are hunting down and killing black people in this country. And with Jacob Blake and Breonna Taylor, we see two instances out of how many millions? 40 million black people in the country? 2. And with Breonna Taylor, I mean, that was an unintended killing. The police weren't going, oh, look, there's a girl who's not aggressing against us. Let's shoot her. No, they got shot at. She happened to be there. They opened fire, not knowing who was shooting at them necessarily, and she got caught in the fire. And I wouldn't be surprised if her boyfriend pushed her in the way or ducked behind her, grabbed her, and held her in front of him or something like that because he was a desperate man in a desperate situation. People will do that. Wouldn't be surprised at all. He seems like the kind of person who would be selfish and do that. I mean, most hardened criminals are, whether or not he's a hardened criminal, but he was the one they were after in the situation. So if you shoot at the cops, they're going to shoot back. They're not going to run away. And Breonna Taylor should not have been associating with criminals. I don't like that she's dead. She was working in the healthcare profession. She's helping people live their lives. But she was associating closely on a daily basis with a drug dealer, and the police were watching them and knowing that this is a situation where you're with a drug dealer, you're going to get into trouble. I don't spend time with criminals. I avoid criminals, and therefore the police avoid me. Right? I have not had very many run-ins with the police in my life outside of when I lived in Minneapolis. When I was living in Illinois, I lived more time in Illinois than any other place in my life. The only time I ever had a run-in with the police is when I got pulled over a few times for speeding or whatever. No big deal. Yeah, Dr. Ibram Kendi, he wants to say that, black people are being blamed for their behavior, even after they're dead. Well, it's their fault, right? If you go associating with drug dealers, if you go attempted kidnapping women's children and assaulting those women, yeah, it's not their fault. It's the fault of the police. It's the fault of the white police. It's the fault of white people in general. No. You need to stop all that. We know this is not the case. We know that these people who are being killed by the police are being killed for justifiable reasons. Tragic? Yes. But, don't break the law. Don't hang out with people who break the law. You won't have these problems. It's really not difficult to figure out. All right, well, I'm the only one who's talking about this, it seems like, anymore. The only one pointing out that, the cops kill more white people in the United States than they kill any other race. By far. Nobody else talks about that. And not in this country, anyway. I don't see anybody. So I'm trying out a new sound system. Hopefully this works out. I don't think it's going to. But thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.